Good evening and welcome to the Marty Heiser Show. We are so glad you're here tonight. You know, sometimes this political stuff is moving along so incredibly fast that I don't have time to properly prepare because I'm on the whole Bain Capital thing. That Bain Capital thing, that's so yesterday. I mean, we have our beloved vice president patronizing, and that's what it is. Patronizing. And I know we have a broad audience here on the Marty Heiser Show. There are many of you out there. If you're a senior citizen, I want to warn you because this guy, Paul Ryan, he doesn't want to take you in a wheelchair and throw you off a cliff. And yet that's what the Democrats are saying. And by the way, our president and the Progressive Party is putting out this ad where Mitt Romney actually killed a woman. I mean, really? Is this where the political debate has come down to? And the latest comes out with our beloved vice president speaking in a black organization somewhere. He says, you know what? Let me quote. He says, they want to put y'all back in chains. That's what the vice president of the United States, that's where this political debate has come down to here in 2012 in this presidential election. I don't know. I think we should all be a little bit above all this. Zero taxes being paid. That's what Harry Reid said on the Senate floor. On the Senate floor? I mean, this isn't a bunch of drunk guys out at a bar, you know, just chatting. This is the head of the Senate, and he's saying stuff like this about Mitt Romney on the Senate floor. They're saying that he killed a woman because 7 years after Mitt Romney had left Bain Capital, there was a steel company where a woman tragically died of cancer. Come to find out, she did have health insurance, and Mitt Romney had nothing to do with it. Yet the current administration is running these ads. And then, of course, there's Paul Ryan lookalike who's pushing an elderly citizen in a wheelchair off a cliff. I mean, that's really what it's come to. Just a point of interest. Follow me on this. Bain Capital, Mitt Romney was involved in the following businesses: AMC Entertainment, Burger King, Burlington Coat Factory, Clear Channel Communications, Domino's Pizza, Dunkin' Donuts, Guitar Center, the Sports Authority, Staples, Toys R Us, Warner Music Group. All of these businesses he trimmed down, which you have to do in a capitalist society. I'm sorry. It's not a chicken in every pot, everything's going to be fine. You can't tear down the wage payer in hopes of lifting up the wage earner. He came in, worked in these companies, and now they're thriving and providing that elusive job that the current administration doesn't seem to be able to get it together enough to help produce in this economy. Let's compare that with some of the involvements of the public sector. Solyndra, that comes to mind. You'll remember that. That was that company they put $550 million of your tax dollars into, and they ended up producing solar panels that sell for $6. The only problem is you can buy as many solar panels as you want for $2. It's a problem. Then there's one place called NR1, bankrupt. Beacon Power, bankrupt. Abound Solar, bankrupt. Animox Solar, bankrupt. Spectra Watt, bankrupt. Eastern Energy, bankrupt. One common denominator besides all these companies started by the public sector, the other common denominator is that they all went bankrupt with your money. You wonder where the stimulus money went to, where all your tax dollars went to. These weren't shovel-ready projects. Come to find out, these are all Obama bundlers. You know what a bundler is? A bundler is a guy that really cooks a lot of crab cakes and buys Chablis by the gallon and has these rich fundraisers come over and bundles them. There's $100,000, there's $100,000, there's $100,000, and bundles them all together, and before you know it, it's a big fundraiser for the Democratic Party. Well, guess what? Those bundlers are buddies now with the administration. So when they're printing money and handing it out because they want to have all these public sector jobs that are going to be built, guess who gets the projects? It's these bundlers. All of these companies contributed to the Obama campaign as bundlers. Trillions of dollars wasted. The choice is clear. Do you want a businessman who generates billions, or do you want a politician that wastes a lot of money? This is the most recent rage or rant that I come up with, but I'm telling you, who knows what Biden's going to say tomorrow? He's patronizing to the senior citizens. He's patronizing to the minority groups. This administration is running the dirtiest campaign in recent memory, and they're dividing us. But guess what? I think America's going to rise above. Because at the end of the day, before a baseball game, we all sing the national anthem. Before meetings, we say the Pledge of Allegiance. We're united. When we watch beach volleyball on TV, we are all united in the joy of sport. And we see what goes on in the Olympics and everything else. And we're Americans, and we're going to get through this, and we're not going to be divided. And their transparent desire to see that is just going to fall flat. So that's my rant for the day. My psychologist says it's good for me to get this stuff off my chest. Sometimes it builds and builds and builds, and I can't just yell at my steering wheel when I'm stuck in traffic. So I come on here and I share with you. Now, we have got a very, very exciting show, and primarily because of a man named David Graham. Yes, some of you know who I'm talking about. David Graham has a wonderful grandchild who's going to be playing her guitar, and we are going to have an entertainment portion of this show, but that comes at the end. But before we do, I'd like to introduce my guest, Chip Register. Thank you so much, first of all, for putting up with my rants.
Happy to be here.
I appreciate it very much. Now, you are an incredibly successful business executive and have a perspective on international economies as well as a specific interest in Dodd-Frank, and we want to pick your brain for that. But our normal rogues gallery is here. Professor Jim Bolano from Western Connecticut State University, the skunk at the garden party, if you will, in higher education, because an avowed conservative Republican, and appreciate you joining us.
I'm an independent, don't
I'm sorry, independent. And then Dave Streit is joining us as well, a remarkably successful guy who's a little upset Ron Paul wasn't our new president, but he's gotten over that, and he's even
Marty, I'm just glad that you made it pro-American to watch beach volleyball. This is great. I can sit there and watch it with my American flag and feel good about it.
Beach volleyball, those ladies compete very well. But Chip, you have a successful company. You're the CEO of global markets for Sapient Corporation.
That's right.
And just tell us a little bit about what you do there and what your exposure is to the world economy as a result.
Well, what the company does is we are a advisor, we're a consultant, both on business and technology to anyone that regulates or participates in the global capital or commodity market. So anybody that's trading, essentially, or regulating traders in the marketplace, we're one of the premier consultancy firms to them in the world.
Okay, regulating financial services. In 60 seconds or less, what the heck happened in August of 2008 when we were all kind of minding our own business, running our businesses, watching our kids grow, and all of a sudden everything went to heck in a handbasket? You were there. What happened to the regulators? What happened? And as a result of it, what have we tried to do to remedy that?
Right. Well, there was a whole bunch of things happening at the same time. There was obviously a bubble in the housing market which burst. Mm-hmm. There was a problem with valuation of a lot of securities that were based on the housing market and other assets. There was significant issues in the credit markets. There was looking back on it, there was some misunderstanding of some of these, the value of some of these by rating agencies that many people rely on. And I'd say overall, there was not appropriate safety nets in government and regulation to catch these things as they were happening.
All right, let's see if I can frame the argument. Because on the one side it says, hey, boys will be boys, hands off the markets, let them do it, let the marketplace reign, everything's going to straighten itself out. That's one side of the spectrum. The other side of the spectrum is, oh my gosh, this caused so much pain in so many people's lives. If only we would have had liberal Democrats there controlling everything, none of this ever would have happened, nothing bad would ever happen, and everything would be okay. On that spectrum, where do you fall, and where is the right place to be?
I think the thing to
By the way, you don't have to buy into my spectrum. I just made that up.
Your spectrum's fine, and
I just made that up.
You might add in there that there's been sort of ebbs and flows. There's been currents of regulation, and where it was more strict in points of time, and where it loosened up. It's probably worth mentioning that it was Bill Clinton that was one of the people that did some serious deregulation back in his day. So it tends not to be so much a partisan issue as a point in time and who's in charge.
Okay.
I think those events all occurred. The genesis of them is all 30 years prior. We have a whole bunch of social policy being developed in the country, that dates back to the 50s and the 60s about the value of home ownership and all these things, and you have the influence of Freddie and Fannie. Then in the 80s and 90s, you have a derivative industry grow up that's securitizing and trading and taking risk positions in a lot of products that are fundamentally attached to this bubble as it's going up. You have rating agencies that aren't seeing this coming. One of the big issues with the rating agencies was, all of their modeling and all their thinking was based on one primary assumption, and that's that housing prices only go up. Yeah. Right. So that's all they've ever seen. Right. So they're looking at baskets of mortgages, thinking, well, these things must be very highly rated because there's a very low default rate on homes, and because the value increases over time. This is an assumption in all the modeling, and it's only the first time in a lot of years you've ever seen housing prices drop that substantially. As the air came out of this balloon, and that wasn't predicted in their models, and it turns out that a lot of these instruments were incorrectly rated. With the benefit of hindsight, you can see that now.
But what I hear you saying is the blame can kind of be spread around to a lot of different. The mortgage originators, they knew that anyone that could fog a mirror will give them a mortgage because we're going to just sell these off to Freddie and Fannie, and they didn't care. Wall Street that was saying, hey, we're making money hand over fist on these derivatives. Get any mortgage you guys can put together, we're going to bundle this and sell it to Greenland, and they're buying this stuff. Who knew? And then the regulators that kind of got their bread buttered by these same guys, and they're loath to say, hey, we're in trouble here. It sounds like there's enough blame to go around, but that's at the end very unsatisfying. And you got to put that
also in the spectrum of time as well, right? That was all happening over 30, 40 years. It wasn't happening over 2 or 3 years, right? The build up to all that, it was a long timeline that led to all that, led to where we got. That in a massive event occurred. That also led to the downfall of banks and which has its own whole economic and political ramifications about how Lehman was treated versus Bear versus any other banks. There's a whole bunch of politics and economics involved with that as well. So an interesting time to be in that business and to be in those rooms listening to those conversations.
At some point, it's unsatisfying if there's been a great crime and you can't hang anyone. But luckily, we have Dave Streit because Dave Streit can really Dave Streit can usually find the culprit in anything. And Dave, your thoughts on Congressman Dodd, Senator Dodd, who has decided to exit the stage, and Barney Frank, who likewise has decided to exit the stage.
Well, it just strikes me as ironic that they try to find redemption for their sins by being at the epicenter of the whole demise of the financial system, where back in the 90s they pressured and passed legislation forcing lending institutions, Freddie, Fannie, the banks, to lend money on no-doc loans, lend money to people that never had a prayer of paying that money back. And then when it all defaults, then they run out and they say, hey, let's name this Dodd-Frank, so we're kind of cover our tracks and make it look like we're not the cause, but we're the cure. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. Now, I want to just dig into Dodd-Frank in 1 second, but Chip, are you prepared to give a layman's definition of a swap or a derivative?
Sure. That's what's frequently called derivatives or swaps are essentially instruments that allow people to pass risk from one to the other in a customized way. So, great examples, and I was there at the beginning of some of these markets, and a great example would be if you're an airline and I'm an oil company, right? My job is to punch holes in the ground and find oil. That's really what I want to do. I don't want to have a bunch of risk to the oil price. What I want to do is be great at exploration, production, and merchandising, oil out of the ground. You, as an airline, want to sell seats and buy routes and sell peanuts and all those kinds of things. You don't want to be exposed to the price of jet fuel, right? I have an exposure to jet fuel as an oil company, which I have a lot of it. You have an exposure, you don't have any of it. So you can use a derivative to pass risk from one to another, right? Negate it for both of us. You sell seats. I pump oil, but it allows us to swap out the commodity risk out of both of our books. That's essentially the genesis of the derivative business. It was a wholesale market designed for the customized exchange of risk to let risk come out of the system. Donald Trump doesn't want to be in the interest rate business. He wants to build buildings, right? So he needs somebody to swap that risk away, get that risk away from his business.
So it's, it's unregulated, right? And it doesn't clear in an exchange. Fair? Up until now.
Well, no, there was clearing before now as well, but the mandates for clearing are new, right, and increasing.
Okay, and how big, in terms of the nobody has an exact number, but in terms of the global swaps and derivatives market, what's the ballpark number on that?
The over-the-counter side, that market is probably around 600 trillion.
Oh, that's almost like real money at some point, isn't it?
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, no, it would take Obama 4 terms to run up that kind of debt. Anyway, so Dodd-Frank, what is it going to do for us?
Well, so just to explain what Dodd-Frank is a little bit. Dodd-Frank is first of all, Dodd-Frank is not, it's Dodd-Frank, it's a big bill, right? But it's a lot of things, right? There's 16 sections to Dodd-Frank.
Is it still growing or?
I don't think so materially. Okay. There's 16 sections to Dodd-Frank. There's 256 some odd individual pieces of legislation and regulation in there, right? That create dozens and dozens of reports and dozens of different kinds of studies that have to be done, and it creates 6 major federal agencies as well. So it's not. This is
that'll
not
boost the economy, right?
This is not just a small piece of legislation. This is a massive construct. What it does, if you want to break it down into 3 parts, it does really 3 things. It talks a lot about who's going to regulate. So not only does it reshuffle responsibilities between the SEC and the CFTC and the Fed and these guys that always had this, but it also creates new regulators. So there's the Financial Stability Oversight Council. There's the Bureau of the Federal Insurance Office. There's the Bureau of Consumer Financial Protection. All of these things are all created.
Those are all appointed jobs too, right?
It's not a jobs program, but these were all created to deal with different aspects of the new regulation in order to provide different kinds of protections over consumers or
on a macro level. Is Dodd-Frank helped? Has it hurt? Is it on that spectrum I was talking about? A little bit too far over here, and that's what's holding down housing prices?
So let's talk about that. So it's certainly, and I'll use a Sarbanes-Oxley analogy, because the last major piece of financial legislation we had was Sarbanes-Oxley, right? Which in my view was sort of using a polo mallet to kill an ant, right? It took probably 5 years to implement Sarbanes-Oxley. It cost billions of dollars. It was massively invasive to everybody, to every company operating in the United States. Yeah. And some would argue that it created actually a competitive disadvantage for American companies because compliance to Sarbanes-Oxley became very expensive.
Sure.
Sarbanes-Oxley, of course, for context, came after the Enron scandal. Right, and it had good features to it. It had good intentions to it. There are a couple of really good ideas in there. If you want to say to people, listen, if you're a broker dealer, an investment bank, or something like that, and you're recommending stocks to the public, you probably shouldn't own them, or you should tell people if you own them.
Yeah.
Right? That's probably just a good idea. Right? So in Sarbanes-Oxley, that's a good idea.
Right.
If you're an officer of a corporation, right, you should probably sign something saying that you've looked at the books, you understand them, and you think they're right.
Like John Curzon.
So, those are good ideas that should have been done, right? Whether or not you needed to re-establish the entire, accounting industry in order to do that. So it's a similar kind of thing. If you look at what's been done in Dodd-Frank, there's some very good pieces of intention in there. Protections for consumers from predatory lending. Right, there's some good pieces to that. Those are some needed changes to make sure that people don't get ripped off by predatory lenders.
Right.
More oversight of the rating agencies that we were talking about to make sure that these guys have members on their board and other regulatory mandates to make them as effective and efficient as they can be in providing guidance to people who are investing in securitized products.
Let me ask you one question on that, okay?
Yep.
The rating agencies, before it used to be Goldman Sachs wanted to sell something, so you call up one of the rating agencies and say, I need a high rating on this thing, I got to sell it. Well, who's paying the bill? Goldman Sachs.
Right.
So that'll affect the rating,
so there
right?
was a perceived conflict of interest there.
Right.
Real
And how
or
is that-
imagined, it's of course impossible to say, but there was a perceived conflict of interest that has been dealt with in it's similar to the way that they.
So how do they change that?
So that's been inside the legislation. There's rules about the rating agencies and how you can what has to be declared and find how you can be a customer and a recipient of these things.
Let me just ask you, on all these regulations, there's again this kind of right wing, we're over-regulated, and if the market just had free reign, everything would work itself out. Let the markets work.
Yeah.
Are some of these best of intentions hindering the economy coming back?
I don't think the best of intentions ones are hindering the economy. So if I just finish a small list of them, so clearing and collateral. So it says if you're going to be trading in these markets, you need to be better collateralized. You need to have more money per trade and per institution, so that if something goes wrong, you're not gonna sink everybody around you. Executive compensation, right?
Yeah.
So if there is a material restatement of earnings because something has been all screwed up and somebody made lots and lots of money, right? Then there's an opportunity for people to look at that and say you may have to pay some of that back if there's been a massive restatement of earnings, to an executive clawback, right?
Once the money's been spent.
Yeah, more data available for investors, right? To make sure there's more information, there's more transparency.
And this is all part of Dodd-Frank.
This is all part of Dodd-Frank, and it's all good, solid ideas.
Okay.
But Dodd-Frank also has its detractors and things that should get fixed or are going to get fixed or may never get fixed, or we can talk about what happens in a potential Romney world, about what happens then. But if you look at it, there's a thing called the Orderly Liquidation Authority, which basically says there's a branch of the government that can deem a company to be systemically risky and dissolve it. Which I think a lot of people have a question about its untested constitutionality.
That's called overreach.
About whether or not the federal government can go and dissolve a private enterprise that's owned by shareholders with its own independent board, and they can dissolve it based on unclear criteria of what systemically risky means. So that's a...
Professor Bolano, have you seen this same thing, this sort of flight to security, the nanny state manifested in the financial markets, and is there an ebb and a flow to all this, or where are we at politically?
Well, sure. I mean, in law there's an old expression, big cases make bad law. And these are big cases. Enron's a big case. The financial meltdown is a big case.
That's a great soundbite.
So you get this reaction. But you also talk. I know you can get back to Dodd-Frank, but you talk about globalization and the global economy. And my area is not finance, but it's politics. And in this election,
good, because my area is not politics.
No, but Americans think, at least in their thinking as they're going to go to the voting booth this year, that they're in charge of their nation. Whoever they're going to put in there, if it's a change, it's going to change in a different way, it's going to get fixed. Or we're going to stay the course and it'll eventually get fixed. But we talk about energy independence. But energy, if we start making our own, oil is still a global market. We're worried about European financial institutions. How much of our own control do we actually have? Politically speaking, but from the economic standpoint. How tied in are we if we become energy independent to still the global market?
You're extraordinarily tied in, right? So we have right now a sovereign debt crisis in Europe. People don't know how this is going to play out. But and I think the U.S. banks in particular took a lot of medicine over the last 24 months, cleaned up balance sheets, recapitalized, did all kinds of things to put themselves on a much sounder footing.
And also individual households are doing the same thing, right? Aren't the individual consumers deleveraging a bit? The credit card bills aren't as high, that kind of thing?
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Savings rates are going up a little bit?
That's all true, right?
Okay.
So all that's coming into, and whether or not how that's happening at a pace compared to Europe. But if you look at the balance sheets of U.S. banks versus the balance sheets of European banks, you get much more comfortable being over here and being over there. But you also remember that it's after if the credit crisis in Europe plays out and these banks which hold a lot of this debt go under, that's going to hit U.S. banks. They're the counterparty to these other banks, and that'll hit them just as hard.
Okay, lightning round. Dodd-Frank, all this regulation, good thing, bad thing, or needs to be changed?
Well, it's definitely a needs to be changed issue, and I have a whole bunch of things, and I started out with the liquidation authority as potential gaps. There's a whole bunch of other potential gaps. The Volcker rule, what it does to the derivatives industry, and the example we said about the oil company and the airline wanting to to swap risk, and that becoming harder to do. But probably the biggest question that the legislation faces and people have about the legislation is this. Because it's so expensive to implement this, because being compliant is so expensive, billions and billions of dollars across the U.S. banking industry alone, billions and billions to implement, have you not just increased too big to fail? Because the only institutions that are large enough to be able to afford compliance are the biggest institutions.
Right.
And what it could potentially do is drive smaller institutions out of the very businesses that it was set up to entice them into. And that could be ultimately the big Achilles heel of the entire act, is that it has for a piece of legislation that was designed, and the title of the legislation, if you look at the long title of the legislation, right, it says it's to prevent too big to fail, and it might actually be increasing the too big to fail phenomena.
Wow.
So that could be the largest single detraction that some people have from it.
Well, listen, thank you so much for coming in.
My pleasure.
For making sense to all this. I see this economic stuff on TV, and you don't know, is it going to be okay? Isn't it going to be okay? Dave and I, Dave's like, he's got, potable water in his basement with meals ready to eat and stuff like that. He's stockpiling this stuff. I think everything's going to be fine. Romney will be elected. It'll just be like Reagan in '80. Everything will work out. Dave's not so sure. But we're going to switch gears here now. We're going to be talking about just raw politics. I don't know if you know, but in Connecticut we had some pretty interesting primaries. Yes, the lady who's made a fortune with large men in tights fighting each other, where the fight is, the outcome of the fight is already regulated and already known what the outcome of the fight is going to be. Linda McMahon, who's, by the way, been on this set. Linda McMahon has been here, and she won the primary. Do the math on that. Susan Beisowitz was running in a primary, and she did not come in to talk. And unfortunately, don't walk in front of the camera. Oh, you did. Look at that. That would be Matt Grimes, who's going live television. This is Matt Grimes. But Susan Beisowitz, who we invited to come on the show, couldn't quite make it. You know how the liberal...
In this state, there are no extras, no fluff, no frills, no free lunch, no second helpings, no streets paved with gold, no promise, no certainty. In this state, life is a bitter struggle to survive with the least. It's home to 1 out of every 11 families in America. It's home to 1 out of every 6 children in America. It's home to more than 32 million people. It's the state of American poverty. And if you were poor, you'd be home by now.
Why is it you two have so much trouble communicating?
I don't like the way he talks to me. He doesn't have to use that kind of language.
All I said was that you had a big osteo fight. Oh, okay, well, what about the secrets you kept from me?
Oh, so I didn't tell you about my drug allergies. Big deal.
That could have been nasty.
Ooh. Okay. So how come I always have to go to your place?
I'd be happy to come to you, Judith. I can't fit the X-ray machine in my car. How's your shoulder doing anyway?
Fine.
Yeah?
I worked up to 3-pound dumbbells yesterday.
Really? Huh. Just 3 weeks after surgery. That's pretty good.
Yeah?
Communication is the best medicine. A message from the American Academy of Orthopedic Surgeons.
Well, now we're getting somewhere. Group hug.
Hi, I'm Major Samantha Weeks. I get to live my dream every day of being an Air Force fighter pilot and flying the most advanced aircraft in the world. Before I could ever climb into the Thunderbird F-16, I had to prove my flying skills through intense training, hard work, and determination. The road to my goal was long and challenging, but the reward is out of sight. You too can live your dream and accomplish anything when you set your mind to it.
I thought indoor tanning was safe. They said their tanning rays were less likely to cause a sunburn.
What you need to know is UV light from indoor tanning can cause
Premature aging, including wrinkles, sagging, and age spots.
So instead of making you look cool, it can make you look old.
and even worse. UV light can increase your risk of skin cancer, including melanoma, the deadliest form of skin cancer, especially when exposed at an early age.
And treatment can be surgery, and sometimes even chemotherapy and radiation.
In fact, current estimates are that 1 in 5 Americans develop skin cancer.
And 1 person dies from melanoma about every hour.
I don't want to be one of them.
I don't want to be one of them.
I don't want to be one of them.
This message brought to you by the American Academy of Dermatology.
I'm telling you,
Welcome back to the Marty Heiser Show. And young ladies out there, let that be a lesson to you. Indoor tanning is fraught with danger. You should just be pale and sickly looking. I think we can all agree on that, don't you?
I guess so.
All right, we're on the beach volleyball. They were not sickly looking. And outdoor tan. We are joined by a political savant and a good friend, Matt Grimes. He, all things having to do with Connecticut politics, he's the man. And of course, Professor Bolano and Dave Streit. We want to talk a little bit about what happened a couple days ago here in Connecticut. The big winners, Rohrbeck, Linda McMahon, and then Murphy won as well. Let's start with McMahon. Can a woman who's made millions of dollars with men fighting in tights actually become the United States Senator from the Nutmeg State? Your thoughts?
Well, there's a lot of time left. I mean, it's August. We got 3 months to go. That's, what do they say, 2 weeks is a lifetime in politics. There's a lot of time left. I think she definitely starts this race as the underdog, though. She's running against a very popular congressman who, by all means, all of 3 of his opponents will tell you that he's a very skilled campaigner. He's a very shrewd politician. He knows how to do it. I mean, the fact that he was the nominee of the party as opposed to one of the other congressmen who's been there longer, I think says a lot. The fact that all statewide office holders passed it up so that Chris could have a chance is good. And she does come off of a 12-point loss to Dick Blumenthal back in 2010. I think that definitely is weighing on people's minds. I mean, I think it's very, very difficult to go from a 12-point loss in a year where you should have won to something better than that in a year where Barack Obama's on the ballot.
She should have won against Blumenthal. He was the Attorney General. He had spent decades in political office doing nothing but helping people, and now he got to cash in all those checks. What do you think?
That was the 2010 wave. We talked about that on the show too. That all over the country, you had a Republican revolution, except in Connecticut. And not that he was even close. It was a rout.
So you think Blumenthal, it was going to be harder to beat
mark
than
my
Murphy?
words, that if Linda McMahon had not been the Senate candidate in 2010, Tom Foley would be the governor right now, Mark Boughton would be the lieutenant governor right now, the 4th district would be in Republican hands, and they would have picked up more seats in the legislature.
So you got no love for my gal, Linda McMahon?
I'm not saying that, Marty.
Why are you such a player hater?
I'm just saying that she was not an effective candidate in 2010. This time, I think she's shown that she learned from some of the mistakes that she made in 2010, and she's on the way back. But we have to remember that this is in order to win in Connecticut, Any Republican Senate candidate will need 1 in 4 of the votes that Barack Obama is getting because of Bridgeport, New Haven, and Hartford in a presidential year. There are more votes in those 3 cities that come out once every 4 years than there is any place in the state. And I think that's very difficult for any Republican Senate candidate to overcome. And you have to remember, the seat that she's running for, Joe Lieberman has had it for 24 years. Lowell Weicker had it for 24 years. Abe Ribicoff had it for 24 years. And Prescott Bush had it for 24 years. So if Chris Murphy wins, he could very well be in that seat until 2037.
But the only reason that Linda McMahon was able to beat Chris Shea was due to her appearance on the Marty Heiser show, and we've documented it. Our polling shows that.
Yeah, that's true.
There's a huge spike.
And Chris Murphy is not. Chris,
refuses to come on here.
There, you need to
Put it this way. I think if Susan Beisowitz had been the candidate, this could have easily been a 50-50 election out of the gate.
I don't.
I think that this would be a very close election. I think Chris does start out with the edge. I mean, I'm not a fan of his. I've never voted for him, but I certainly think he begins this election with a little bit of an edge.
Tell us about Rohrbeck. What's his story, and how is he going to win this election?
Well, the name Rohrbeck is, of course, an old-time Connecticut power family, in the Republican politics. Back in the 30s, it was the Rohrbeck era. Go to the state capitol. There's a Rohrbeck era, where they basically ran Connecticut from Litchfield County. His grandfather, I assume that would be.
Started the law firm. It's a very large law firm.
But he's a well-liked candidate. He's from his district up there, and his Senate seat kind of spills out into ours with the last redistricting. But he's more of a Litchfield County guy, northwest, which means he has a lot of clout in that old in the 5th congressional district. The old 4th, I guess it would be. No, the old 6th. The old 6th. So I think he's going to do fine. Now he was in a race with 3 other candidates. He got 30-something% of the vote. It's not a mandate, and I think it's a good thing for him. Well, Esty seems like she's somebody on the other side that's got a lot of Democratic clout too. Her husband's a state commissioner.
But didn't she?
But it was good that the Speaker of the House is not his opponent, I think.
Yeah,
Donovan
but didn't Esty kind of win by default because the Speaker of the House definitely had the inside track on that.
Right.
On that
the fact that he went down, I think, helps him.
2 points on that. Jim's absolutely right. Andrew Rohrbeck represents the largest state Senate district in the state. It's huge. It goes from Brookfield all the way up to the Massachusetts border. That's a huge district, and it's also very disproportional to the rest of the state, the 30th. 30th is 40% registered Republican. A lot of people don't know that. Very disproportional to the rest of Connecticut. So Rohrbeck brings a Senate district that's a better Senate district for a Republican in that seat than Sam Caligiuri had, a better Senate seat than David Cappiello had. He's got a very large chunk of Republican votes in that 30th district that neither candidate that Murphy faced is. And that's the other thing, too, in this 5th district. Chris Murphy is off the ballot. All bets are off for the Democrats. I think
with him on, he's going to have coattails, and it's going to be a big thing.
He might very well, but the point, though, is that the people that have voted for him up in the northwest corner can also vote for Andrew Rohrbeck at the same time. So it's not like they have to give up a vote for Murphy this year. The House race in the 5th district was lost in 2010 in the 16th Senate district. That's the area around Waterbury. That's the area that both Chris Murphy and then Sam Caligiuri represented in the state Senate. So for the first time in 3 elections, those voters actually had to choose between Caligiuri and Murphy, whereas before they voted for Murphy for the House and they voted for Caligiuri for the state Senate. For the first time they had to choose between, and they broke for Murphy. So that's what I think you see in the 5th district. The other thing, too, is Elizabeth Esty has a lot of baggage. She was a one-term state rep. She voted to repeal the death penalty, and she represented Cheshire in the state Senate. She voted to repeal the death penalty right after the Pettit murders. I think she does not come in as the front runner at all in this race, and I think that this race is almost Rohrbeck's to lose at this point. They say they're calling it a toss-up. I would paint it light red.
So Rohrbeck's going to win. McMahon's going to lose. Did I tell you this guy knows about Connecticut state politics?
I don't.
He's got a guy like Rain Man. Go ahead.
I don't think that McMahon is going to lose. I just think she starts out as the underdog, and I think Jim would agree with that.
All right, switching gears here. Let's go to the national stage. Start with you, Paul Ryan. Do we like this pick? What do you think?
Let me just start. On the last week's show, we had a guy call in and say, "Hey, say something nice about the president for a change." Can I just take a second and say something nice about the president to kick us off?
If this is going to be sarcastic and demeaning to my president, I don't want to hear it.
Is it the fact that he roots for the Chicago Bears and so does Marty?
No, that's a good thing. He's a Bears fan.
I think
How bad can he be?
This may be one of the greenest presidents we've ever had, and I applaud him for that. Think of the benefits of maintaining unemployment rates at 16%. Carbon dioxide emissions have collapsed in the last 3 years, and that's a fact. You can look that up. The growth rate in healthcare costs has collapsed because of 16% unemployment. By raising the unemployment level to 16%, we've got all these benefits. People aren't driving to work. carbon dioxide, and this is true, I heard it on the radio today, carbon dioxide emissions are collapsing.
Well, if you heard it on the radio, it must be true.
But look that up, it is true. So I shout out to the president for high unemployment, for what it's doing for the environment as a whole. Paul Ryan, the fact that Obama has now named Ryan in speeches on 2 different occasions in the last 3 days tells me that he's really kind of concerned about the fellow. This guy has ignited the base. What I'm looking to see, when Sarah Palin went up to the NASCAR races, she electrified NASCAR. For obvious reasons, right? When you walk with stilettos and tight pants through the pits, everybody loves it.
Why do you got to do that? Why can't you just appreciate her for political philosophy?
I like her for her brain.
Okay.
So I'm going to be interested to see. I mean, Paul Ryan is kind of sweeping the Tea Party.
It's like a misogynist group here. It's like, go ahead.
Embraced by the Tea Party.
Yes.
I can't wait to see how NASCAR embraces. If he's embraced by NASCAR, that's a good sign. Let me tell you another sign that really kind of intrigues me. Over the course of the last week, we've seen these sideshows where the base has been ignited. Today it was Chris the Baker. So Chris the Baker has Joe Biden come to his bakery and say, hey, can we come in here and get some stuff? And he says, no thanks, I'll take a pass. All of a sudden, that goes viral, and guess what? Chris the Baker's shop is sold out in 4 hours. He's bombed. That's a good sign. Chick-fil-A overwhelmed Chick-fil-A with support.
Hold on 1 second. Is this Chris the Baker you're calling in? You got to turn your radio, you got to turn your TV off. When you do, we'll talk to you. Go ahead. What do you think about Paul Ryan?
At first, when he made the pick, I was a little cautious.
All right, listen, do you have something to say? Contribute. Go ahead. You're on. Go ahead.
Yeah, what Dave said about carbon dioxide actually coming down, or I think he said it's reduced. He's completely wrong. This is the most carbon dioxide we've ever had in the atmosphere at virtually any given point. We're almost at 400 parts per million.
All right. Well, listen. This could have something to do with the Koch brothers. And by the way, next week we're going to have a special guest who's bringing in a documentary about the Koch brothers. Some have called it a hatchet job about the Koch brothers, but you come in because here at the Marty Heiser Show, we report, you decide. So fair and balanced. He's going to come in, and I'm sorry. Did you choke on something there? All right. It's going to be next week. The Koch brothers.
Are you going to be frankly biased?
Well, we'll see. We're going to air it on TV, and we'll see. Maybe these guys are scoundrels. We'll see. All right, we'll see you next week. What about Paul Ryan? What does he bring?
I was a little cautious about it because, historically the VP slot has been kind of, the vast wasteland of American politics. When people go in that slot, they tend to disappear or so, very few exceptions. And you need people in the Congress, and Ryan is an energized mind and a leader in the Congress to work on things like debt reduction and deficit reduction. And I thought he should probably be better off there. But having said that, having digested it,
that ship has sailed.
He is going to.
The bumper stickers are printed.
And from the traditional point of view, he's going to excite the base. He's exciting the Tea Party, and that's going to be big. Probably in places like Virginia and North Carolina, where they need to turn those 6 states that Obama won in 08, that Romney needs to turn over for him to get the Electoral College 270.
Federal level, what do you think?
I think that Ryan's an excellent candidate. I think he's certainly qualified for the job. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to make any difference. I think the people at the end of it, I think Jim's absolutely right. I think we're hearing this debate now. We may hear it through the convention. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a choice between Obama and Romney. And people are not going to go in there saying, I'm going to vote for Obama because Joe Biden's on the ticket. I don't know anybody that would do that, first of all. And I don't think anybody's going to go in there and say, I'm going to vote for Romney because Paul Ryan's on the ticket. I think at the end of the day, that's going to be the choice.
Who wins?
What I think that it's really too early to call. But if you look at the electoral maps today, I think the president does have an edge right now today. I think 538.com put it at like a 69-31 advantage today.
What's 538.com?
It's the Nate Silver's political blog that tracks all the polls.
Who's Nate Silver?
Are you kidding me?
Go ahead.
Are you kidding me?
I'm not kidding you. We have a vast audience here. You got to break some of this stuff down.
He's the NewYorkTimes.com pollster.
Okay, so these polls are saying that Obama has an edge?
Does he have Obama over 270?
No.
No, okay.
No, but...
I'll bet you Nate Silver knows who Marty Heiser is.
I doubt that.
I don't know. I believe he does have a house up this way too. So maybe he does watch.
Okay, lightning round.
He's gonna call.
Predictions. Where do you see this whole federal thing coming down?
Well, Mitt's going to win by 2 points. So.
Jim?
Romney wins with the 6 states. And Joe Biden appears on your show.
With a
2
guest.
months.
Yeah, okay, I'll hold my breath for that. And your prediction?
I'm reserving comment.
Reserving comment. I think Mitt Romney wins because all the independents and all those who are undecided as of now are going to break for the new guy. Unemployment's up above 8.3%, not including how you guys count it, and gas prices are going up as well. I think it's time for a little hope and change. Along those lines, we have Kylie Pirre, a wonderful young lady, and she is going to sing a few songs. Now, this is David Graham's granddaughter. Believe it or not, David Graham doesn't seem that old, but apparently he really is an old guy. But Kylie Pirre is going, I've seen her perform, and she has a lovely voice. So we've had all these thorns, and it's about time we have a flower among us. And for that, we have Kylie Pirre. Kylie, what's the first song you're going to be playing?
It's called Everywhere by Michelle Branch.
Excellent. Take it away.
Give me 2.
Go right ahead.
You're everywhere to me, and when I close my eyes, it's you I see. Everything I know, it makes me believe I'm not alone. I'm not alone. Everything
Wow, that was very, very good. Very, very good. Now, you are joined now
by my dad.
Tell me a little bit about your dad and his encouraging your music. Come on over here, Bill.
When, I don't know, before I can even remember, we would always just be downstairs in my basement, and he'd be playing the guitar, and I was 6 years old singing and into the microphone and messing around, and I mean, it just, like, I always had a passion for it, and he always really helped me out, and whenever I wanted to do anything, whenever I wanted to perform everywhere, he was always right there, like before I knew how to play the guitar and stuff like that, so he's just been there the whole time.
Well, you got a pretty cool dad.
I do.
I'll tell you.
I do. I have to admit, he is probably the coolest dad ever.
It's all recorded. Well, Bill, how have you sort of supported your daughter in this musical interest? Because you've been interested in music for a while, too.
Yeah, I've been in bands in and out for 20 years or so, and to be honest with you, it's work for me. It just comes easy to her. So she's talented. It just comes out.
Last question real quick. What's it like to have David Graham as a father-in-law?
It is interesting at times.
I can only imagine. We'd have to do a whole show on that.
Yes.
Well, we're going to play another song. We can't wait. Go right ahead.
Behind on Blue Bayou. Working till the sun don't shine. Looking forward to happier times on Blue Bayou. I'm going back someday. Come one May to Blue Bayou, where the folks are fine and the world is mine on Blue Bayou, where those fishing boats with their sails afloat, if I could only see that familiar sunrise through sleepy eyes, how happy I'd be. Gonna see my baby again. Gonna be with some of my friends. Maybe I'll feel better again on Blue Bayou. Saving nickels, saving dimes, working till the sun don't shine. Looking forward to happier times on Blue Bayou. I'm going back someday. Come one May to Blue Bayou, where the folks are fine and the world is mine on Blue Bayou, where those fishing boats with their sails afloat, if I could only see that familiar sunrise through sleepy eyes, how happy I'd be.
That was incredible.
Thank you so much.
We have a few minutes. Bill, stay here too. Now, when did you first notice this musical talent in your daughter?
Oh, she was very little.
Very little.
Barely walking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, is there like, if she's, does she sing into the hairbrush when she was growing up, that kind of thing?
We actually had her singing in front of people. I think she could barely walk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, how old are you now?
I'm 17 right now.
17?
Yeah.
And have you done any professional music, or do you just play for family, friends, the occasional TV show, or where are we headed with this?
Sometimes we'll go and we'll play gigs together. We play it like at like restaurants and stuff like that, you know, wherever people want us, and like we do the parties like the one that you saw us at, and you know, but I mean, and I've done a couple bigger things, but I mean, otherwise, yeah, I kind of just like it, and it's just fun, and I really enjoy it.
You have a voice like an angel. I mean, do you feel like you really want to go somewhere? Is this something you're interested in, or is it a hobby and you really want to be a landscape architect, or what are you going to do with your life?
I really like. Don't get me wrong. I'm really passionate about music, and I love music and stuff like that. But what I really want to do is I ride horses, and so I really like that. But I mean, this was my first ever love, really.
Well, speaking of horses, I'd like to invite David Graham. David, if you just come over here, right here would be great. Yeah.
Hi.
Oh, now David. Now this is your granddaughter.
Yes,
and yeah, tell us a little bit about her, how she was growing up.
Her father would know better than that.
I understand.
But she's always been a sweetheart. She's our oldest grandchild. You should know that. They're an older Marty.
Well, I know. I mean, you seem to me like in your maybe late 40s, and here you have grandchildren. It's unbelievable. Very virile man.
Got married at 12, and my daughter got married at 13. So add up the years, and that makes me about 50, I think.
They even had a child bride. Oh, that's great. All right. Well, listen, it's very great. Now, do you go to school in the area? Where would people know you from?
No, I live in Rocky Hill. It's right outside of Hartford, and it's a really small town. But I mean, I like it there. It's good. But I mean, I'm down here a lot because I have family down here.
Well, listen, this has been a wonderful show, the Marty Heiser Show. We have entertainment. We have a little politics. There's a lot going on. Next week, if you join us, we're going to have a documentary about the Koch brothers. Are they dreaded industrialists that are underwriting right-wing political campaigns, or are they great patriots that are saving America? You decide. We're going to have a documentary and a discussion about that. And then after that, there'll be a whole parade of politicians coming in here looking for your vote. But I want to thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
I want to thank you so much for raising a wonderful daughter.
Thanks.
And I want to thank you so much for allowing your daughter to marry Bill. So you know how this works. We really appreciate it. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot. And we'll see you next week on the Marty Heiser Show right here, same time, same place. You always get the truth, and it's absolutely free. So what else are you going to do? Thanks a lot. We'll see you next week.